Josh Blair arrived home this morning an instant neighbourhood hero. Just hours earlier he ran the race of his young life to finish 10th in the Uncle Toby's trial on the Gold Coast. He led the entire field by more than 27 seconds in the swim and only slipped back late in the ski leg.
I'm only first year junior and it's the first year I have to get onto the ski, so that was my weakest leg and just had to hold through there.
He crossed the line ahead of most of the Ironmen who are in full-time training.
It was mainly going up there for experience this year and then try and qualify next year.
The first round of the series is next week, again on the Gold Coast. He then won't have the bags unpacked for too long. The competition moves to Sydney, North Queensland, Victoria and Perth. And if he's any chance of winning a contract, he must compete in all the rounds at his own expense. So he's now on the lookout for a sponsor. And if his first attempt is anything to go by, he's certain to provide value for money. The day's first event started in the face of a gale and driving rain. Only the dedicated stayed around to watch the rest of the meeting. The win was greeted with a mixed response from drivers. It forced some to slow down so they didn't flip. For others, it gave them an extra lift in confidence.
With a glassy smooth surface, the swells tend to stay around from the other boats and it sucks the boats back down in the water. If you get the surface tension broken up, you go faster.
The wind didn't whip up quite as big a chop as expected, and all the races were completed without a major mishap. The same couldn't be said at Belmont. 25-knot gusts created havoc for the 16-footers in the annual long weekend regatta. Out of the 50 starters in the Coca-Cola handicap, only 22 finished due to gear damage or wrong sail selection. Lake Macquarie boat Our Town Fire Protection took line honours, with Kennards Hire a very close second. The Beechwood home skiffs taking first and second fastest times. Heidi Mather has been playing squash for 5 years, but it's during the past few she's begun turning the heads of state selectors. The Year 10 Cessnock High student is ranked number 1 in New South Wales and in the top 4 nationally. Consistent performances saw her selected in this year's state training squad. Last week, Heidi made her representative debut as the number 1 seed for New South Wales at the Australian Squash Championships in Alice Springs. She led the state team to victory in the 15 years age group, the right-hander only dropping 1 singles rubber along the way. Now back home, it's back to training, today hitting with one-time coach Joe Dunnage. Heidi is a determined individual who knows exactly what she wants once she's on the court.
Winning, just like hitting the right shot at the right time and, always getting to the ball.
And just how far does Heidi want to go in her chosen sport?
Be the best I can and just push myself as far as I'll go.
Her next goal is to compete at the British Junior Open in January. Her only barrier, the travelling expenses.
Most families have a pet cat, but Robinson Circus has a pride of cats which are not the type that curl up at the end of the bed. They're the kind which look terrific out of harm's way.
So how about you coming in, Peter?
You've got to be crazy.
Yeah, a little.
The cats may have 9 lives, but I've only got 1. 2-year-old Bengal eats around 6 kilos of meat each day. Trainer Jamone Cohen assured me he wouldn't eat me, but he might take a swipe.
If he attacks you, you can just reach behind you and throw some manure in his face. How? Don't worry, there will be manure if he attacks you.
The circus is performing in Newcastle this week and Lake Macquarie next week. Jerome says full houses each night are proving animals in the circus are still popular. He says his tigers are well cared for. Raised in captivity, they'll live twice as long as tigers in the wild. Newcastle Council is considering banning acts like this with claims of cruelty. Bengal was just a quiet cat at heart, but wasn't crazy about handing out kisses for strangers. Peter Ryan, happy to be alive, for NBN News.
Lake Macquarie councillors have made numerous attempts to get the waterfront estate into public ownership, but to no avail. A draft local environment plan defines uses for the land, a large portion for open space, while 5 pockets can be used for development.
Up to now, there's been suggestions by Macquarie's that they're prepared to give us 50%, provided 50% becomes residential. We're now identifying the areas that we believe can be used for residential or urban development.
Macquarie's General Manager Ross Howard says the latest plan still doesn't address a realistic acquisition price.
But until somebody says, well, this is what we're prepared to pay for it, and that's enough for the land, the whole exercise is a little bit of talk and not much more. It's fundamental to know what the land is worth and that council can afford to pay it.
As councillors sit down to decide their next move on Greenpoint, they'll do so with an updated value of the land. The Valuer General has just informed council land it encroached upon for the upgrading of Crowders Bay Road, Valentine, is worth $27,000, 10 times more than the compensation council is proposing to give Macquarie's. However, Mayor Kilpatrick believes the latest Greenpoint offer will not cost the council a cent.
I don't believe we really should have to pay, to be perfectly honest. I think there's sufficient land there that could be used for urban development that would allow the rest of the land to be made available to the council for the Foreshore Park.
Macquarie says the latest proposal differs little from others and it's not expected to succeed.
Lake Macquarie man Steve Owens and his 1978 Valiant are embarking on what Steve calls an adventure of a lifetime. The Camp Quality Caper is a 3,200 kilometre rally which begins on Saturday at Beechworth in Victoria and traverses 2 states, ending in the Hunter Valley town of Broke on Saturday, October 16. Steve is the first ever Lions Club entrant.
We're hoping that by our club actually entering a vehicle and running in the event, it might make it easy for other clubs to have a look at it and say, well, it's a good fundraising effort and it's a good project.
The Charity Bash, now in its 2nd year, has attracted 50 entrants. The only main requirement, all participating vehicles must be 2-wheel drive. The rally will benefit Camp Quality, a non-profit organisation which runs camps for children with cancer. Organisers hope to raise $100,000 through sponsorship or donations received along the way. As well as his own sponsorship, Steve has a novel fundraising pitch. His Valiant, which was supplied by a local motor group, will be raffled off soon after the race finishes. With 174,000 kilometres on the clock, Steve is confident the old girl will handle the task ahead.
Oh, you can't beat those cars to death. They are the greatest cars.
Catherine Lamont, NBN News. Medicab, a mini ambulance of golf buggy proportions, got its first public Guernsey during the Winfield Cup final series. It was precisely traumatic scenes like this and the sometimes slow and inefficient means of escorting players from the field to develop the compact medical transport unit to assist players.
They don't have to move from anywhere. They're lifted straight onto the stretcher. The stretcher can be raised and lowered. They can be taken right up the tunnel into the dressing room. They need not put any weight or pressure on their injured portion of their body.
The shuttlecraft buggy is imported from America. The medical modifications done at Newcastle-based company Marlin Industries. The Medicab, which contains emergency medical equipment including a stretcher and oxyviver, provides swifter and more efficient support for injured players. During the league finals, the need to lower the stretcher height became apparent. But that's not the only changes that may be made. Within the next few weeks, Medicab will be assessed by New South Wales Rugby League Chief John team of league-appointed doctors. After this, Mike hopes to place one on every Winfield Cup ground ready for next season. But league may not be its only application.
As a matter of fact, this morning I spoke to some people from Sydney who are doing the Madonna concert, and I'm waiting for them to get back to me. They may be interested in having one on the show down there, and also you too.
Catherine Lamont, NBN News. Ashes tourist Wayne Holdsworth and Blues Sheffield Shield batsman Michael Bevan joined more than 40 local cricket supporters to officially launch the Newcastle cricket season. For Michael Bevan, a broken toe has him more preoccupied with the crutches than the bat. Wayne Holdsworth has had a more constructive start to the season. He was a member of the City side which defeated Country in a game played in Sydney last weekend.
I'm hoping my form continues on from last Sunday, and after the Ashes tour, I want to keep going my way, and obviously with Merv out, there's a couple of spots up for grab.
It's also going to be a big season for Newcastle. On October 29, the number 1 sports ground will host a New South Wales versus New Zealand game, the first international match held there since the earthquake.
All the test players for New South Wales will be available, so you're going to see the War brothers, you're going to see Mark Taylor, Michael Slater. It'll be a tremendous match. The New Zealanders will have their test side, or close to it, available for the game.
Mr Hamilton also says the local cricket competitions are shaping up to be stronger than ever.
There's a lot of there's some new players come into Newcastle, some young country players, but they're all very good cricketers, and you're going to see the depth of talent in Newcastle again this year. Plus you've still got all the experienced players like Greg Arms, Mark Curry.
Catherine Lamond, NBN News.
The visit by Minya Samka, Secretary of the Tibet Information Office, began with an appearance on NBN's This Morning show with Nat Jeffrey. He's trying to highlight human rights abuses in his homeland.
Basically, with regard to transfer of Chinese, a huge, massive influx of Chinese civilians inside Tibet, and a huge Chinese military presence with their nuclear installations, and the great deal of environmental devastation and destruction going on inside Tibet. And of course about the forced sterilization, forced abortions being, inflicted on the Tibetans as of China's population control.
Tibet has been under Chinese control since an invasion in the 1950s. However, United Nations resolutions have failed to persuade the People's Republic of China to quit the region. Minya Samka wants Australians to back Tibet's campaign for freedom.
Well, I think the Australian people must really request, your government to recognize the Tibetan government in Israel, and also, support the Dalai Lama's measures, steps towards, like bringing about a peaceful settlement, to the Tibetan problems.
The recent establishment of the Tibet Information Office in Canberra is being viewed as a step forward for the Tibetan people, with their plight being brought to the attention of both the public and the Australian government.
The 20-year-old apprentice electrical fitter mechanic from Taree is the state winner of the Safety Apprentice of the Year competition. It's a competition run each year by the National Safety Council. Megan has spent almost 4 years in the electricity industry. She previously had a win in a regional Apprentice of the Year competition run by the Newcastle Vocational Training Committee.
About 3,000 people took the opportunity to be served by the RAF's Supply and Support Squadron at an outdoor breakfast as part of the Matara festivities.
We had about 3,000 people here, and this has been our best year in the 3 years that we've run the breakfast in the park.
9 chefs and a group of stewards and Air Corps cadets began preparing at midnight. Feeding the masses required 180 dozen eggs, 150 loaves of bread, 90 kilos of baked beans, 200 kilos of sausages and 200 litres of orange juice. That's the equivalent to about a week's rations at the base.
It's a lot more than we feed daily at the base. We feed big numbers there, but obviously in better facilities than we've got here too.
There's that old saying, an army marches on its stomach. Is there a reciprocal saying for the RAF?
We don't have a saying like that, but it certainly is true. It equally applies to us. If you get catering wrong, people are very soon unhappy about it.
Since the fall of communism, cash-strapped Russia has been selling minerals on the international market. This is adversely affecting Australia's mining industry.
So the prices of all the major metals, lead, zinc, copper, aluminium, nickel, are all depressed at the present time, and that's having a very harmful effect on the Australian economy.
The mining industry is fighting back with support from the Australian Research Council. A team of researchers at Newcastle University is investigating how to improve the mineral separation process. They're looking at the role additional chemicals and energy in the form of vigorous stirring could play in retrieving more and better quality minerals from the host rock. If successful, the benefits will be enormous.
It'll increase the revenue to the companies themselves, but of course if they can sell more mineral because their mineral is cheaper, then it has an economic flow on to the country.
The research project will be conducted during the next 3 years. Jane Anderson, NBN News.
Hunter wine producers have strongly opposed the federal government's 55% rise in sales tax on wine, with the Vignerons Association President Bruce Tyrrell in the front line of the battle. He believes the Senate's rejection of the increase is a victory, but not the end of the matter.
It's still only the first step in the chain, Gary, but the first step's been taken, and it's great to see that the coalition, the Democrats and the Greens have really stuck to their guns on this issue.
Defeat of the wine tax had a Hunter flavour, with opposition Senators John Tierney and Sandy McDonald voting against the bill. Senator Tierney isn't letting debate rest, challenging Hunter ALP parliamentarians Eric Fitzgibbon and Bob Horn to publicly state what impact they think the tax will have on wine industry jobs. Winemakers aren't giving up on their fight either, with the industry keen to thrash out the question of sales tax.
We have asked all the way along for a fully independent inquiry into the industry so that we can set a level playing field into the future. If we know that, then we're sure what we do, we can go ahead and invest and create some new jobs and create a heap more export dollars.
The wine industry's win couldn't come at a better time, with record export sales in July backed by strong local consumption. In addition, vines in the Hunter have already started bearing fruit, giving vignerons a positive start for the upcoming vintage. For the 216-strong field, today saw the end of a hectic week of golf on the Cessnock course. After 4 rounds, titles in boys and girls 12 to 17 years were being finalised, and all players were giving their best to the final hole.
Strong winds posed an extra challenge today, and outright boys leader Tom Arnott was expecting a tough time.
Yeah, well, the wind will play a big factor. I'm not really sure, but I think the scores will be rather high. I think it'll make a big difference. So, good start and see what happens.
Greg Rawson of Parks mastered the win and snatched a two-shot victory. In the girls, Belmont's Adele Bannerman was leading her age group and holding second outright, but couldn't improve on her position. The outright girls title claimed by Stacey Doggett of Victoria with the last round 74.
A modern-day police escort laid the path for the colonial mounted police reenactment. Dressed in 19th century costume, the group was led by surveyor John Oxley, the first white person to land on Port Macquarie. The actor impersonating John Oxley then repeated the words of the surveyor in front of about 3,000 people.
I am the humble servant of our gracious Governor, and I name this most beautiful and safe port, Port Macquarie, in honour of His Excellency Governor Macquarie.
Then, to mark the occasion, a replica George II cannon, donated to the city by Port Macquarie Mayor Ray Cooper, was fired 3 times. If you are spending the weekend on the pushy, you may as well get a few friends to help out. This quad tandem cycle, just one of 50 entries in the Rod Sonta Memorial Bike Ride from the entrance on the Central Coast to Newcastle and then back. Last year, Senior Sergeant Sonta tragically died of a heart attack during the ride which he had organised as a charity event. That ride raised $6,000. This year they are hoping for more for Ronald McDonald House and the John Hunter Hospital. The riders are taking it easy along the way, just a leisurely trip down the highway. Peter Ryan, NBN News.
About 50 animal liberation supporters protested outside the Ringle Valley Company near Newcastle. The family business has produced battery-farmed eggs for 55 years. The hens spend about 18 months in cages laying the eggs.
They stand on very thin wires, they become crippled, and often they have fractured or broken legs. They constantly peck at each other because of the frustration that they're under, and they can't even spread their wings.
Actor Linda Stoner formed part of the front line in the demonstration.
The whole idea of having fowl confined like that is just appalling.
Demonstrators want producers to switch to free-range farming, allowing the birds more freedom to move around. Manager Ian Livingston says this would be economically unviable. He denies that battery farming is cruel.
Our birds don't come in contact with any bacteria, any of their own manure. They don't come in contact with any vermin or pests.
Mr Livingston says in a free-range situation, producers don't know what the birds are eating. In cages, their diet can be controlled. Smoke billowed from the Fibro house in Curry Street, Merriweather about 9:30 this morning. Fire brigades managed to contain the blaze before it engulfed the house next door. Ambulance officers arrived to find a 34-year-old man on the front lawn. He'd been inside the house at the height of the blaze. Fire brigade officers praised the efforts of neighbours who went into the house while it was still alight and dragged the man out. Brian McMahon risked his own life by going into the burning building.
You know, I eventually kicked the door open and I could see the guy in the hallway. So I just went in and dragged him out.
He says the heat was intense.
You know, there was a lot of smoke around and it was very hot once you got in. So I was surprised at the heat once I got inside the house.
The man suffered third-degree burns to most of his body and is now in a critical condition in Sydney's Royal North Shore Hospital. An investigation is underway into how the blaze started.
Novocastrian soprano Gillian Sullivan is a soloist with the Australian Opera Company and will star in the Hunter Orchestra's Fine Music program. 3 series have been planned: Great Masters, Discovery and Showtime.
And some of the best performers of the world, really, people like Roger Woodward, Hugues Reiner, Edo de Waard, all part of this series. So international performers and the very best that we have in Australia.
Performances by the Australian Chamber and Sydney Symphony Orchestras have also been included, paving the way for the Hunter to have an orchestra even more strongly identified with the region within 3 years.
What we have now, we are 3 years away from that target. What we have now is a professional orchestra, professionally run with a professional administration and with high-class music making. What it is not is residential yet. But the goal is in sight, definitely. The kind of support we are getting from the funding bodies, the kind of increase we have received from the Australia Council, for instance, continuously over the last couple of years is very encouraging.
Subscriptions are now available, the orchestra performing its first concert in March next year. Melinda Smith, NBN News.
The state's top 2 rugby officials requested the meeting this afternoon. Besides some in-depth discussions about whether a Newcastle team would be financially secure, they checked out a couple of possible venues that could be used for home games. Marathon Stadium, the Showground, and Number 1 Sports Ground, the favoured options. 2 months ago, state officials announced 3 teams would be joining the comp. Among them was a Central Coast side. The Carry On Club made the approach and at the time thought their team would be a sure bet.
We had an approach from Laurie Marr, who comes from the Carry On Club. He had no idea what the bigger horizons were, so Carry On were never invited as a club to participate at all. We were interested in the district of the Central Coast.
But now only one place will be offered between Newcastle and the Central Coast.
We have to judge whether the Central Coast has got the expansion for the future or development of the code, or whether we take it with a strong rugby area is at the moment here in Newcastle.
Newcastle officials came away very confident the favouritism has now swung towards the Steel City and even discussed the prospective colour of the team's jumpers. The announcement about which area will get the nod isn't too far away.
The decision will be made, I would hope, by the end of this year, probably in December, and the whole thing will be up and running in 1995.
Several fire units were called to the Bellstone Avenue home following reports of an explosion and fire early this afternoon. Fire officers believe quick action by several youths who were at home when the outbreak began saved the 2-storey building from further damage.
It's probably an exercise for all people caught in the same position that if they do locate a fire within their dwelling is to close all doors behind them. And the lads did close a door within the room that was on fire and possibly saving the rest of the unit and possibly the...
Cause for the fire is yet to be established, however it's thought paints and thinners stored in the bedroom fuelled the blaze. Investigations are being carried out by police and the fire brigade.
Drive along there. All right. Yep. We'll see you. You all right?